So this is exciting for me because I've got my book, The Truth About College Admissions. This is by Brennan Barnard, and I want you to know it's Barnard. Isn't that confusing, Brennan?
Not for me.
It's your name, right?
I mean, I do have two last names, so I get it.
Right, because Brennan, because people want to call you, what do people want to call you?
A lot of things, but when they're nice, they want to call me Bernard or Brennan or Brendan or, I mean, you name it.
Yeah, I have to be careful because I want to respect you and say your name correctly. I want everybody to as well. And then Rick Clark, it's like the easiest name. It's like
Right.
there's nothing confusing. But this book, this is a great book. So this is The Truth About College Admissions. And Rick's in his office right now at Georgia Tech. This is a crazy day. It's homecoming, right?
Homecoming weekend, which means a lot of our alumni boards are on campus. So I got a lot of numbers swimming in my head. If I just start like throwing out numbers, don't worry about it.
So it's intense, and it's also the end of October. So it's like, when is your early action deadline at Tech?
Yeah. We have two early action. We've got one just for Georgia students, which already passed. It was
Okay.
October 16th. And then we have one for out-of-state students, which is coming up on November 1st, which means November 1st will be a big day for students to apply.
Right. So this office he's in is going to be just piled with mail because oh no, you don't actually get mail anymore, right?
Very, very little mail. Yes.
Are you old enough to have like remembered when there was mail?
Oh yeah, I definitely have some paper cut scars to prove it.
Right. Like that doesn't happen. And then Brennan, Brennan's an interesting, Brennan, you got a lot going on. Okay. So Brennan, where are you coming to us from today?
I am at my home in New Hampshire where the leaves are changing and falling, and I work remotely, so I work for Khan Lab School out in Silicon Valley, which is a mastery-based in-person school founded by Sal Khan. So I go out there from time to time, but today I'm here in my home in New Hampshire.
So if people don't know Sal Khan, like, do you know Sal? Like, do you visit with him?
Yeah.
Like, you have meals with him?
Have we had a meal? I don't think we've had a meal, but yeah, I mean, we go on walk. Yeah, we talk.
You've had walks and snacks,
Yeah.
like drinks.
Meals.
Right. You haven't had a lot of eating, but you're very active. But Sal Khan founded Khan Academy, and now there's the Khan Lab School. And Khan, for people who aren't familiar with this, you need to be familiar because it's really groundbreaking. It's revolutionary. It's like, people get all excited about Elon Musk. Like I don't get as excited. In terms of just change, the rest of the package, you can put somewhere else. And innovation. So I don't want to compare Sal Khan to Elon Musk at all, because just philosophically, it seems like they're on different spectrums. Sorry, I went there. Even that, right? Brennan was like, right? Like, Tony, why would I even bring that? I'm talking in terms of like monumental, different ways of looking at being a disruptor. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. His kind of mission is a world-class education for everyone everywhere, right?
Everywhere. And it's fascinating because so much of education is gatekeeping, and so much of admissions is search, selection, and scarcity. And the scarcity part is what causes so much anxiety and so much stress. And when I think about Sal Khan and I think about Khan Academy, I think search, selection, abundance, access, education for all. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just love it because also, Brennan, you've worked in independent schools for years, and also Brennan and Rick, they're very knowledgeable. And I'm spending a couple minutes here talking about how knowledgeable they are, because there are a few people in this space who have the professional experience and the life experience. Because I know, Brennan, you also have children who have gone through this.
Yep.
You're in it, man. Yeah, and
Rick's kids aren't going through it, but he's got kids.
You got younger kids, Rick, right?
I do. I have a freshman in high school and a 7th grader. Yeah.
So now the anxiety is starting to percolate. So now you can get them anxious, right? Like, this is the freshman year, you start to get them worried about college and in middle school, right?
Absolutely not. Not in my house.
Neither of us buy into the anxiety.
I was going to say, we're on project, get through 7th grade, get through 9th grade. We're not even dealing with college at this point.
Right. Absolutely. I don't want to misrepresent you at all. I'm being sarcastic because this is what so many people deal with, because I did a program and we're kind of in the same situation. Rick and I, we don't know each other professionally that well. It's our first time actually having a meaningful conversation, which is, I think it's been meaningful so far.
No question.
Right.
We'll let you know in a couple minutes.
We'll get to the meaningful part. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of setup, but I think the setup is so important because, you have all different perspectives, as do I, because I have a senior this year, I got a sophomore, and I've got a fifth grader, and and I go to a lot of the same schools that you visit. You guys do a lot of programs. The thing that's so cool about Brennan and Rick, and this is, again, I want everyone to check out their information because you're going to find different interviews with them. This is a different kind. They do lots of interviews, lots of technical interviews, and I want you to listen to them because you'll get a lot of technical information. I'll give you some of that, but I want you to understand more about, this is more about the emotion behind the college process, because I think when it comes down to it, that's what this is about. That's the problem. Like, the problem isn't college. The problem is the emotions behind all of this. Can you speak to that?
I'll take a quick crack at it and say, I would hope that instead of it being framed as a problem, it's an opportunity. It is, yes, it is emotional. It is about relationships, but it is really also an opportunity. Instead of, as you said earlier, a focus on scarcity, one of the things that we focus a lot on is that's a false narrative. The truth is that getting into college is not only not that hard, it's going to get easier in the years ahead. There's more colleges admitting more students now than ever, and that percentage is going up in the United States. So I do think we have a bit of a mischaracterization of what the kind of landscape of higher ed looks like. And Brennan and I try to start there by saying, look, take a little of the pressure of your ability to go off. It's really more about understanding who you are, how you think, who you want to be around, and where's that going to then lead you. So yes, it's emotional, but it's discovery. So that's an opportunity. Yes, it's emotional, but it's also relational. So that's an opportunity.
Yeah. And how do you have conversations as a family about, however you define family? How do you have conversations about kind of hopes, expectation, fears, all those things? Like you said, it's emotional and it can be emotional, but emotional can be a positive thing.
Right.
I'm right with you. I do a program called Happy, Healthy, Almost Stress-Free College Planning for Students and Parents. And the idea that this should be exciting. This should be wonderful. This should be great. So, we're all on board. The three of us are on board, and there's lots of other people who are on board. But I know that people listening to this, I get a lot of parents, I get a lot of students too. They hear what you're saying, but it doesn't register because they go to these schools and they're part of communities where it's super competitive. And just last night, I was doing some research and read a story about a kid who had like a 4.5 weighted. He applied to 16 of 18 schools. He had like a 1560 SAT or something and got rejected from 16 of the 18 schools. And he got a job at Google.
Right.
So he's not going to college right now. He's going to Google, which was which was fascinating to know all these paths. I think a lot of times parents are the ones who are scared and are concerned. And I've talked to Denise Pope as well at Challenge Success, because Denise really reframes how we look at this. But like, if you were to take a sledgehammer, a figurative, metaphorical sledgehammer, and hit people over the head, can you just take a moment to do that with me to help them to recognize that they're going to be okay, and where they go is not as important as what happens when they're there? Can you speak to that? Can both of you do that, please?
Yeah. Maybe I'll take a quick first crack at it by saying something I say a lot, and I believe it because it speaks directly to what you're referring to, and that is particularly parents of high school students should talk to fewer parents of other high school students about college admission and more parents of current college students and recent college grads, right? Because when you do that, what you hear them say time and time again is, it worked out. Like, this isn't what we kind of had scripted oftentimes, couldn't have predicted the way this might have all, ultimately resolved, but she's happy. she's got an internship. She's dating somebody we like. You talk to these parents of recent college grads and they say, yeah, we couldn't afford the place that they most wanted to go. But you know what? In the end, it really did sort of, work out. And I think that it's interesting as a parent myself, that so often when our kids are really little, we know to talk to parents in the chapter ahead of us, but somehow we forget that when they're right around that high school, bordering college age, and that just drives the madness, swirls the consternation. It's not helpful.
Yeah, and like you said, Harlan, I mean, I have a son who's a second year in college, and a daughter who's a senior in high school, and both of them in their college searches have kind of said, they've looked at a range of schools, and they've kind of arrived at this area of like, I can go to any one of these schools and have a really great experience, right? And it's real. I mean, maybe it's just kind of having been around me for too long. But I think focusing on kind of what are the opportunities there, whether it's for study abroad or for internships or connection, or what are the ways that the experience there are going to light them up, right? And how are they going to be able to thrive in any one of these schools? And there's no school that has the corner on that market. And by the way, there are a lot of super selective schools where there are the mental health of students is just deteriorating fast, and so when we think about kind of you probably had this conversation with Denise, but when we think about metrics for success, like what are you gunning for, right? Like what is the end goal, and really defining that and working back from there.
Yeah, that idea of students are working so hard to get into these super selective schools, and they're training how to be overwhelmed, overtired, anxious, and not full of hope. This is kind of the practice to go to a place where they can be overwhelmed, anxious, and struggle emotionally and with their well-being. And I asked that question. It's like, what are you working towards? And then, that also brings me to both of you have so much, and me too. Like, we have this experience of working with families who are so set on a particular path, and students. And the thing is, that path, like at Tech, I was going through, the admissions standards. It's tough to get in there, Rick. Like, I mean, you reject a ton of amazing, incredible, wonderful people, right? Like, you break hearts, man. Like, you are the dream shatterer. I know you're also the dream maker, but
yeah.
That's just the reality of being in the position. It's not you. You don't do it. It's not a personal vendetta. It's that there are a certain number of spots, right?
100%. I mean, people talk a lot about how confusing college admission is, and it's gray and it's not transparent. I actually find it quite simple. I mean, college admission, it comes down to two things: supply and demand, right? Number of applications for the number of seats. And being now here at Georgia Tech for 20 years, I've seen that radically change. 5 times more students applying for, additional seats that we've added, but certainly not meeting that demand. And then institutional mission. Who are you? Well, first and foremost, we're a public school that serves the state of Georgia, which means you are fundamentally going to have less of a chance of getting in here if you're not from the state of Georgia. And we are unapologetic about it. That is who we are. That's our first, obligation, is to take care of our state. But it means, though, that it's not fair. We're not just going to line kids up numerically and make admission decisions. We're going to do what we were created to do and be who we were created to be. So in that regard, yeah, like last year, you could look at it that way. We denied 84% of the students who applied. We also offered admission to over 8,000 students, and I like to focus on those 8,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't mean to, I'm being, sometimes I use superlatives. What's the right, I don't even know the right word. You're not a dream crusher. I feel bad because I should never call you that, Rick.
Listen, I was called worse this morning, actually, already.
Really? Was that at home?
Was that at home?
Yeah. Right. That's your kids and family. Yeah, I know how that goes.
Harlan, back to your other point, just really quickly on the kind of the mental health piece. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but Making Caring Common at Harvard Grad School of Education came out with a report earlier this week about young adults. They've looked at teens, they've looked at parents, but they did this survey of young adults, and 36% of young adults reported anxiety and the key areas they identified were like lack of meaning, purpose, and direction, financial worries and achievement pressure, relationship deficits, and some of these things. And when you think about those in the context, these are 18 to 25-year-olds. These are kids who are in college and just out of college. When you think about those things, I think we need to center on some of that. Like when students are looking at college, like where are they going to find a sense of purpose? Where are they going to find that meaning? Where are they going to find relationships? Where are they going to find some place that doesn't just kind of perpetuate this achievement culture?
Yeah, I mean, Brennan and I have a slide that we use in some of the presentations for school communities and other organizations that just says how is greater than where. And, this idea of how you show up. Are you healthy? Are you ready to be proactive? Are you prepared? How you show up as a family to wherever it is far more important than, a certain statue or a certain arch or a certain, bumper sticker. Like that how piece and taking care of the health of how is huge. And I think that we've gotten way too focused on where.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's like the technical parts people really they focus on that, the getting in, the mission, the goal. And I like to rely on the data. And Brennan, I didn't hear that recent data, so thanks for sharing that. And if you could send me a link, and we'll include it in the show notes. And if you want to include that slide that you all share as well, because the goal of these podcasts is to give people some real actionable information that they can rely on and reinforce this message that things are going to be okay. Because like I totally agree, things are going to be okay. When it comes to like my kid's a senior, and the story of his college career is he's going to apply to some schools, and he's going to get into some, and he's not going to get into others. Then he's going to choose one, and he'll go and he'll have some good experiences and some not so good experiences. And then he'll either decide to stay or he'll go somewhere else, and he'll have better experiences and some not so good experiences. Then he's going to graduate, and he's going to have an incredible life.
Yep. But will his roommate be naked? That's the question.
That's a very good question, Brennan. We did not in this storytelling. I did not include any nudity, but that's a very good question. And if my book's The Naked Roommate for anybody who doesn't understand Brennan's sense of humor, because if
there's a lot of people that don't understand my sense of humor. Thanks for
if there's no concept, right? Yeah, so The Naked Roommate and 107 other issues you might run into in college. But basically, that book is just all. What's really interesting is, I come at college from a journalist's point of view, and also from just like a living human's experience. Like I started as just someone who went to college, and it was just awful. And then I transferred. I didn't understand why it was so awful and hard. And then I realized it's awful and hard for lots of people. Then, like you just said, Rick, I talked to people who had been there and done it, because we like to talk to people who are in the midst of the anxiety and the storm of emotions. But I talked to people who had been through it and figured out how to deal with it. And that's The Naked Roommate has the collection of stories. And then it corroborates with the data, which reinforces that, oh, this stuff's actually true. And then we get to the beginning. And I like the American College Health Association, the ACHA, NCHA data. And I've been following that for years. And the spring data came out recently. It kind of sneaks out. And some of the things I found interesting, within the last 12 months, have you had problems or challenges with any of the following? And this is kind of like a summary of the data. And I'll just give you the totals. I'll run down these, and you'll just I'd love to get your feedback. So academics, 47.8% of students, they had challenges or problems. And I also want to point out, the way they break this down is through cis men, cis women, and transgender non-conforming students, which I think is so important, that there's this acknowledgement that there are so many students who are realizing who they are, or are coming to they're becoming compatible with their light and those things that are important to them, and especially our trans and non-binary, non-gender conforming students are the ones who are most at risk. And for a lot of parents who have strong ideas of how they feel about this, you know what? Tomorrow it could be your child. Today it could be your child. You may not even know. There are so many students. We see this, so many, right? You all see this, right?
Yeah.
Right. More and more are finding the courage to speak. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. Okay. Academics, 47.8% of students had problems or challenges. Career, 38%. finances, 50.3%, procrastination, 73.9%, faculty, having a problem with faculty, 13.3%. I'm surprised that's not higher because I get letters about professors who are horrible all the time, students who really struggle. Anyway, family, 38.2%, intimate relationships, 38.6%, roommate, housemate, 28.2%, peers, 23.9%, personal appearance, 53.3%. Personal appearance is the third highest here, or is the second highest behind procrastination. So it's people who don't feel good enough when they look in the mirror, which I find fascinating. Health of someone close to them is 40.9%. So when a student gets to school and they're dealing with life, these are some of the things that are causing obstacles that keep them from persisting. And then we know through that data of a third of students are anxious, and we know 2/3 or more than half experience feeling hopeless. And in a school where, people are high achievers, and I know, Brennan, this is where you've been around most of your life, we know so many of those students struggle. So going back to, we know there's a problem, and we know there's this issue in college. We know it affects happiness, it affects well-being, it affects retention, it affects persistence. But when it comes to in high school, when it comes to earlier, if you have to be perfect to get into some of these schools, a school where you're at, Rick, and Brennan, a school where you advise so many students, they want to go to these schools where you have to be perfect to get in. So if you have to be perfect in high school and you don't have room to struggle, and then you get to college and you have to be perfect and don't have room to struggle, where does someone have room to struggle? And how could they struggle in a way where they know they will still be successful and not ruin their life while fixing the mess along the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And I mean, I would challenge a little of that kind of idea of being perfect, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't have to be perfect. I mean, colleges could fill their classes with perfect kids, and they don't. and also, I would say that, yeah, I mean, that's where students and families need to kind of check themselves early with, like, what are they chasing with that perfection, right?
Right.
The thing going through my head is going through that, enumerating those particular categories. It just sounds like life to me. Is this really a problem? I mean, I struggle with affordability of things. I struggle with the intellectual academic side of things. Like, I think that's just life. We live in a broken world. Things aren't perfect. It's going to be a challenge to achieve, academically, to have relationships, to be confident about who you are, how you look, and how other people perceive you. That is life. The most important thing, I think, if you're a parent listening, is to know, and Brennan does a great job of this in our presentations, and I've borrowed a lot of this, like, for parents to be aware that these are the kind of things their kids are struggling with, whether they're telling them that or not, and how important it is as a parent to make sure that your kid knows that, as you said earlier about your son, I support you no matter where you go. My love is not correlated to a bumper sticker. And then on the flip side, for colleges, and we've had this at Georgia Tech over the years, like, we enroll bright kids who are generally type A, who have big dreams and are going to try to do amazing things in life. That's going to bring its own stress and tension, regardless of anything else, because they are aspirational. Just as much as a kid who wants to play in the Premier League for soccer is going to be under pressure. That's just is what it is. We have to support them when they're here. And colleges are dumping millions of dollars into doing that, right? And so I think that's the big thing is, we can't change the way the world is structured and the fact that all of us as humans have struggles and challenges. That's not actually a problem. It's about support. It's about, coming around side at the high school level and the college side.
Yeah.
And being comfortable with uncertainty.
Absolutely. And, and I presented it this way because I was actually really curious just to see how you would respond to it, because it's an imperfect world. And I love, Rick, you're mentioning the data sounds like life. I hadn't really thought of it like that's life. And then, but the challenge is so many students don't know how to deal with life as independent adults because, my focus has been how do you deal with the social, the emotional, the physical, the financial, so that you can complete and be your academic, but reach your academic potential. And those other areas in high school, it's only for the most part academics. So, students really have to on their own do that other work. And then I have a proposal that maybe we can put out there, and maybe Saul would be interested in this as well. But I think at these super selective schools, they should save 5% of the class for students who are like 3.0 students, right? 3.0 students who have struggled but have kicked ass emotionally, who have figured out how to develop the coping tools and those mechanisms, and have had a trajectory of success, so they can be some of the people to support the other students who don't know how to be imperfect. What do you think about that? Is that possible? Because they could be the guides.
I mean, I think some schools are already doing that inherent in their process in kind of holistic admission, right? They're building some of that in, right? They're building those kids in that are the kind of pillars of the community. They are the glue. They are the, so I think that happens. I don't think we hear about them as much, right? Because that doesn't sell papers and doesn't, but I think a lot of colleges are doing that. And I would just say that's even more of a reason for students not to be authentic and not to feel like they have to show up. I think that's part of the crisis is, right, or especially around admission, is that students are thinking so much about kind of who they, how they show up to be somebody that somebody else expects, and not just be themselves and let it grow from there.
Yeah, I would just say, like, back to that idea of, the things that determine admission would be supply and demand, and then institutional mission. Who do you want to be as an institution? What are you trying to achieve? And, I think that, to your point, Brennan, every school gets to decide that. And there again, it means that it's not necessarily going to be fair. Here at Georgia Tech, I can tell you, like, we're teaching 3 times more pre-calculus sections than we taught pre-pandemic, meaning that there are plenty of kids who are already in Calc 2 and linear algebra in high school that don't get admitted. And then we're actually taking some students who are, quote, less prepared or less advanced in math. That's about mission. And that's about what we're trying to create here as an institution. And we're not an anomaly by any means. So it's an interesting thought about, like, that's what shaping a class means. That's what holistic admission should bring, is that it's not just one size fits all and everybody's the same, that you put 2 people from very different backgrounds with different aspirations and interests in the same room. And that makes a great educational, environment.
I love to hear that from you, because, I have such a different perspective, because I'm not on a campus and I'm not in a high school. And, I'm kind of this observer from 10,000 feet who could be a big shot and armchair quarterback admissions. But what I see as I go through this, I see the kids who are like, who dealt with emotional challenges and setbacks, whose grades don't reflect their intellectual abilities. And I'm like, these are the all-stars. Because then I talked to the kids, like I was sitting next to some guy who goes to the University of Chicago. He's doing like he's doing something so fancy I can't even remember. So somewhere smashing, it's Adam. I sound like a moron. But he's doing something so intense. And he talked about, I asked him, I said, like, how do you think being imperfect works? Like, do you have room to be imperfect? Like, can you be flawed? Like, how much room do you have to make mistakes? Mm-hmm. And to go to a place, because he went to Yale, then he went to University of Chicago. And, we know so many of the students struggle at these super selective schools emotionally. Like, there's data that backs that up. And he found it very interesting, someone who was very intellectual, that, that part of us, we don't have a lot of time to nurture. So I think that one of the outcomes that I would hope someone listening to this would take away is, if your kid struggles and they learn how to get better, that is something that's going to stick with them their whole life. And if it means they don't get into a certain school, it means they can get into another school and be unbelievably exceptional and live an exceptional life. Right? Like that's not the end. And I think that's where a lot of parents struggle, I don't know if Rick, how you feel about that in your own life, in your own kids' struggles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my son right now is, like I said, he's in ninth grade. He's taking Algebra 1. He's in like an advanced Algebra 1 class. And I mean, right off the gates, he's failing, right? Not doing well. And he has been going in 2 days a week to meet with this teacher. And like literally this morning, I got an email from her saying he made a 95 on this recent test, and she high-fived him when he came in. I mean, he has been working for it, right? And he's not going to make an A in that class. Like, he'll be lucky to make a C in that class, which is absolutely fine with me because, look, I'm not worried at all about that kid in life. He's going to have tons of opportunities. He's a great kid. He's a good person. He's a fine student in general. He's doing fine in his other classes. But what he's learning about being proactive, about having to put in the work, about trying to juggle, playing football and doing well in math, like this is life. This is what we all do. And so I think that's a big part of it. I just keep coming back though to a little of what we've already talked about is for parents, I think, and a lot of what you said earlier about problems and breaking it down by percentages, like it is about identity and it is about acceptance. And one of the biggest gifts we can give our kids is for them to know that who they are, how they were made, how they were created, and who they are to us is not determined or differential based on what they achieve, where they go, and any of these kind of things. Like our goal is to give them choices and options, to empower them, and to ensure that they are like confident. And I think doing that is way more reflective of your quote success as a parent than the fact that your kid goes to Yale or something.
Brennan, how have you process this and your kids, and I don't want to, your families are your families, and I don't want to push in any of those boundaries, but your kids have had a wonderful trajectory, or at least successful trajectory, but in terms of like having room to struggle and you being in their corner, what's been your parenting style when it comes to helping them with all those other aspects outside the classroom?
Yeah, I've just been there to walk with them, right? Like just kind of like walk next to them and support them, and they've really, I've resisted. It's hard, right? But I've resisted the kind of knee-jerk reflection to step in and try to solve, right? And have just really kind of said, I mean, it's the same thing with our college search. I mean, because I know enough to be dangerous, I've really been hands off, and because of that, they took the lead and did it. Like if I think college is the right choice for them. Just that's my opinion, but that was a decision they needed to make, and where they looked and how they did it was going to be up to them to decide. And so and it's been cool to see them step up to the challenge. I mean, even with their essays and things like that, I didn't say, I need to look at your essay and show me your essay. But, at one point they were like, both of my kids were like, Dad, can you look at my essay? Like, are you going to look at it or what? And so, like, I think when we step back and we don't step in, it's amazing to see how our kids rise to the challenge. And if they don't rise to the challenge, they will. But we can't force. You can lead a horse to water. You can't force it.
Yeah, I think the expectations. I've been focusing a lot on expectations. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I'll talk to parents as well. And what's interesting is to talk to parents who have certain expectations, and unmet expectations equal problems. If a parent has expectations and the kid doesn't meet, then there's a problem. But if the kid has expectations and those aren't the same expectations as the parent, then there are always going to be problems, because there has to be similar expectations. So I think that idea of what does your kid want and what are the expectations, even this idea of applying. How would you respond to a parent who says, Brennan, Rick, I have a kid who is not completing their application. I've surrendered, I've given it to them, but they're just not moving. What should I do? What are your answers?
Brennan, it sounds like your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's asking the student what they what they want for themselves moving forward, right? And And maybe if for that student, maybe college isn't the right step right away. I mean, it's a huge investment, right? And if they can't get off the ground to do some of the base level things, like, then there's not going to be a successful college experience, right? And you can provide kind of support for them around executive functioning and things like that, and maybe that's helpful. But I think, again, I don't think you can force the way forward. I think you need to empower them, and when the time is right, the time is right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said it, because I've shared similar answers, and I think that getting it from another person is really important. That if your kid's not, like I tell my kid, I'm like, if you're not going to do it, then how are you going to do your work? Like, how are you going to take care of the things you need to? Because I'm not going to be there for you. I got enough to do. And if you're going to college and wherever you go, like, you got to be able to do it. And of course you have those other supports, but I think that expectation of my kid's going to go to college, they're going to graduate, go to college. It's like, I think as parents and as students, there's this question of like, maybe you need a break.
Right. And what was it? Was it Anne Lamott who said expectations are resentments waiting to happen?
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Yeah.
I mean, I've also heard expectations are like resentment in training or something like that. But so, I think it's good to have expectation, right? And good to be honest about your expectation, and good to have, I mean, we talk a lot in the book about kind of having honest conversations. Oh, there it is. Having honest conversations early on about what some of the expectations and conditions and pieces like that are in the search. But, also talking about like whose expectations are going to drive this, right? And what those expectations are, and what's driving those, like what hopes and fears are driving those expectations.
I mean, circling back to where we started of this is an opportunity, one of the things I most hope for parents and families supporting adults as well as students is to be honest, to really listen, and to be willing to do what, good college students do. And that is they do their research and they do their homework, and they're open to testing assumptions, and they're open to things not going exactly the way that they think they might. And the only way that happens is by keeping an open mind, listening, asking good questions, being curious. Like a good high school student who does those things, both at school and with their family, will become a good college applicant, will become a good college student. Like that is a direct line through. And I think one of the things that, is really so important for, parents, I think in particular, to hear and to know is that your job's not done when that kid arrives as a freshman in college. Like you're looking for a relationship that's going to last 40 years, not 4 years. And the things you do, the breadcrumbs you put out, they matter. And so like, it's not just about like, let's complete this quote, get through this and get you to college. And now I've done my job and we're good and everything's going to be fine. No, you could break some stuff along the way. So let's make sure we don't break things. Let's in fact make things more solid so that our relationship wherever you go is more solid, so that your relationship when you graduate college is more solid. I mean, that just makes so much more sense than I can say my kid goes to the number 3 ranked school in the country or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's just stupid.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Like I don't get impressed by any of this. I'm sure you don't either. When students go to certain schools and it's like they're going to that school and they're going to have an experience. And we know through Frank Bruni's book, Where You Go Is Not Who You Are. And we know through, I don't know if you've read Jennifer Wallace's book, Never Enough.
Never Enough. Yeah.
I'm reading it.
She was on, I don't know if she was on your podcast, but she's
going to be next month.
Yeah. I can't recommend that book enough. I listen to audiobooks because I struggle reading. It's a weird thing I have. It's my ADHD.
Me too.
And she narrates it and does. You do too, Brennan?
I'm not a reader. I listen.
Oh my gosh, I love to hear that because you're like so bright, and I used to be ashamed that I couldn't read.
Yeah, me too. I
didn't know you had that.
No, I couldn't. I can't remember half the books I read in high school or anything. Yeah,
that's nuts, man. Because like, honestly, I look at you as being so damn like smart and accomplished, and like you're phenomenal in what you do, and just an expert. And man, I just talked to my uncle who's a psychologist. I'm like, I say I read a book, but I listened to it. Is that okay? And he's like,
Totally.
right. Or I should have talked.
What's the point here? Are we retaining information and growing and learning? You're good.
Right. Again, it's about perception, right? I mean, it's just what we're talking about here, right? Like it's about how we're perceived from the outside, and
That's wild. Okay. So I have just a couple more minutes because everybody has hard stops today, and we can always do another one of these, because I mean we didn't even get into the nuts and bolts of the truth about college admission. But the reason that I didn't want to get into the nuts and bolts is because it's pretty straightforward. This book is phenomenal. You walk people through the process from having that conversation. I think it's really important for people to know where this book comes from, and this conversation really sets it up, because the first question is, do you want to go to college? And that's the first question I think a lot of parents, especially from high achieving communities, don't always ask when it comes to our first generation under resourced communities. It's that question of, do you want to go to college, is almost like a ridiculous question, because I could go. So it's really interesting to see, but that's where it starts with the wants, and then this idea that here's the guide, the truth about college admissions, that can really walk you through this. So I really encourage everybody to check this out. I want to just do like a speed round of just some like more technical questions that I get, and maybe we'll do a speed round with some questions from parents, because I get so many I can't answer them all. Rick, I really want to know, and Brennan, you've seen this too. Test optional. It seems like smoke and mirrors. Is it really going to not impact me, Rick? I'll give you the profile. A student who was like, 4.0 student, their SAT was like a 1260. The average for admissions was like 1350 or something. And I told the mom, I said, it doesn't matter. If it's not going to help, don't turn it in, because the GPA is more important. Is that true or not true?
It's true.
In that case, true.
If they're saying they're optional, then they're saying they're going to place value in other places of the application if you don't send test scores.
And you've had so many, and also, how many admissions directors have you had on your podcast and on your different programs? Like 100?
Me? Like 200 on with College Guidance Network. I mean, we've had like 250 experts on over time.
And it's the same answer, right?
Same answer.
Hey, when it comes to having all those experts, there are like a handful of questions that people ask every time. Can you just like reel off the end? Like, just give me like, you could do your own rapid fire, the two of you, just to like give me like a laundry list of like the questions that you get again and again and again that we could just not get again and again, if you can just like answer them. Are you up for that challenge real quickly, Brennan?
Sure. And Rick, so optional means optional. Academics are the most important, right? Like what you do, what the courses you choose and how you do in those courses and how you challenge yourself are the most important, because they want to know that you can be successful on their campus. It's not about a laundry list of activities. It's about investment in the things you choose to do. Authenticity matters. Don't try to be something you're not. Don't obsess about the essay. Put your best foot forward, but there's, you're there to tell your story, not to tell them what you think they want to hear. What else, Rick? What else do we hear?
If you apply to 10 schools that all have a 5% admission rate, it doesn't give you a 50% chance of getting into any one of them. Back to what Brennan said, very specific question, like, is it better for me to take an AP class or a dual enrollment class, or is it better for me to take a AP class and make an A, or a general level class and make a B? And this is the answer to almost every question. We could just answer it this way and hang up, which is it depends. It really depends on, the class that you're talking about, right? There you go. The class that you're talking about, like the school that you're applying to. I mean, that so much of course choice, which does absolutely matter, course performance that really does matter, is going to be read very in a very holistic way. It's going to be read differently by one school to the next. And so, quit asking that question for what you think colleges want to see. Answer that question with what's best for you and what you're trying to ultimately achieve.
Right.
Right.
Does early decision or does applying early matter? Unfortunately, yes. At most schools, it will. But does that mean you should do it? Not necessarily, right? Like just gaming the system doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. But if there's two or three schools that you'd be excited about and they're selective, it doesn't make it sense to apply early? Maybe.
So what about this? This is one of the ultimate hacks that I recommend is for families who. Well, let me just ask you this. There's two things. So I know I'm getting anxious about time. Do you think if someone that can't get any financial aid and they're paying full sticker price, $350,000, whatever that total is, do you think that is and they don't have $350,000 to write a check out over the course of 4 years? Do you feel like that is a worthwhile investment? Is there a good return on your investment if you're financing that education?
I think that
you're talking value of college, basically.
I'm talking is $350,000 too much to spend for an undergraduate degree if you don't have that money?
One of the things we talk about in the book that I think is just so important is to have very real, early, and honest conversations about money, not just what you can pay for, what you're willing to pay for, but like loans. How does your family view loans? And what do loans really mean? Most 17-year-olds have no idea about most of that. And largely, if we're talking about coming out with 6 figures in debt, if that's really what we're talking about, then you better be darn sure that there's a historical payoff for that. Like, okay, you take a Georgia Tech student who is a computer science major who walks out of here with $100,000. That's rare, but it could happen. And they're starting out making $110,000 with a trajectory that's, pretty steep and quick. Maybe, I think, would be the answer. But it is going to vary between one student, one family, and the next about debt tolerance or whatever. But I guarantee you, the kid who can come here and get into our CS program and walk out with $100,000 can get into many other places that will throw money at them and have just as many opportunities at places like Google and Microsoft and NCR and you name the rest. And so I think in that regard, you have to have a very real conversation about why we're making this decision.
And then the hack of a student who gets into a super selective, they fall into that donut hole where they don't get any financial aid. And then they have a state school where there's an honors program that wants to give them a full ride or a ton of assistance. Exactly what you said, Rick. If you could see Brennan's face, if those of you who are listening, Brennan's got a face like, Brennan, what's the decision?
It's a no-brainer, right? Right? Like, save that money for grad school.
Save the money for grad school. I'm going to leave it. I can't agree with you more. I think it's such a great hack. I'm also a big fan of community college and transferring and using those programs, working at a business that's related to something you think you might enjoy, and then using that as a way to then transfer in. Oh gosh, there's too many questions, Rick. I got more. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to leave this with, what are some of the resources? What are resources that you could recommend if people want to learn more about the truth about college admissions and want to gain more insight? Rick, I'll ask you, Rick, then Brennan. Rick, what are some additional resources you recommend? How can people follow you?
Right. So we do have a website, which is just truthaboutcollegeadmission.com. And you can go there to get podcasts, to get information on the books. We have a lot of free resources that we're constantly adding to. So we hope people will take advantage of that. In terms of me on Twitter, which I'm still calling it, it is at Clark2 College. And that's an easy way to follow me. Georgia Tech also writes a blog, which largely is me, but sometimes other people, and they can get that from the admissions site at Georgia Tech.
Great.
Yeah, you have to follow Rick's blog. I mean, it's great, and he posts pretty frequently, and so that's great one. And our podcasts, tune into our podcast. We have great conversations with really. We'll get you on soon, Harlan, and And then the website, and then I'm on Twitter, and I write occasionally for Forbes as well. So so you can find me there.
And the College Guidance Network, right?
And the College Guidance Network, absolutely. Yep, we have tons of free programming. I don't know when this is coming out, but this we have something called Deadline Hotline this Sunday, which is a free call-in where you can get last-minute help on your applications from college admission leaders from Penn and Ohio State and University of Vermont and other places. So
that's awesome.
Great resources.
You guys are great. You do so much wonderful work. You help so many people, and I'm so grateful that we had the chance to visit, because we're very much aligned and I think mission oriented, and we just want to help. So anyway, I know everybody has a lot to do. You're working and helping and doing your thing. So thank you so much for being here. I'm grateful we had this chance, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Everybody, get The Truth About College Admissions by Brennan Barnard and Rick Clark. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Harlan.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thanks.